Famous YouTuber kicks an old man in public. He didn't know 100 Hell's Angels were watching. Cold autumn afternoon. Costco parking lot, upstate New York. The kind of ordinary day where nothing should go wrong. Gray skies, scattered leaves, people buying groceries. Then a black SUV arrived. Loud music. Expensive cameras. A 24-year-old influencer hunting for content. An elderly professor with trembling hands dropped a jar of tomato sauce. What happened next? It went viral for all the wrong reasons. But 5 men on motorcycles had seen everything. And they weren't laughing. Before we get into this, tell me, where are you and what time is it right now as you watch this story? I love finding out where you, my audience, are listening from. Comment your city below, subscribe, and like the video. You help our stories reach more people who agree that the world needs more kindness around. Thank you for this. Now let's get back to where it all started. Near the entrance sat an old blue sedan, a 2003 Honda Civic with rust spots blooming along the wheel wells and a bumper held on by hope and duct tape. Its trunk stood half open, revealing plastic grocery bags and a small stack of worn ESL workbooks stacked beside them. Behind the wheel was Lucio Bennett, 72 years old, retired literature professor, living quietly on disability. Parkinson's disease made his hands tremble, but had never touched his spirit. Every Tuesday afternoon, he made this same trip, buying groceries not just for himself and his 2 cats, but for the adult immigrants he tutored for free at the community center downtown. Quietly, humbly, invisible to most. That day, he wouldn't be invisible. Across the parking lot, 5 men sat astride chrome motorcycles, leather vests gleaming in the pale afternoon light. They'd stopped for coffee after escorting a veteran's funeral procession, a service they provided without charge, without recognition, because some debts could never be repaid in words. Rex Super C. Carlson sat in the center, a bear of a man in his 50s with gray threading through his beard and eyes that had seen enough of life to recognize goodness when it appeared. Beside him, Brando, Big Bite, Steele, and Knox, brothers not by blood, but by the kind of loyalty most people never experience. They sipped their Dunkin' Donuts coffee in comfortable silence, watching the world go by. They had no idea they were about to become witnesses. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped Jeremy Skirl, 24 years old. In a red Supreme tee, distressed designer, jeans that cost more than Lucio's monthly disability check. Sneakers so white they looked like they'd been kept in a museum until that morning. His hair was styled in that deliberately messy way that required 45 minutes and 3 products to achieve. 10 million YouTube subscribers. Brand deals with companies that paid him 6 figures to hold their energy drinks while pulling pranks on strangers. A career built entirely on humiliation, outrage, and the algorithm's insatiable appetite for manufactured chaos. Behind him emerged 2 crew members, guys with expensive cameras and cheaper morals, paid to capture whatever disaster Jeremy orchestrated for content. "All right, guys," Jeremy announced to his phone camera, that practiced YouTuber enthusiasm crackling through his voice like electricity through a frayed wire. "Today we're testing how far people will go when provoked. Public reactions. Real emotions. You know the drill. Smash that like button and let's make this go viral." He panned the camera across the parking lot, hunting for targets the way a predator scans a field for the weakest prey. That's when he saw Lucio. The old man was lifting a bag of groceries from his cart, his hands trembling with a kind of shake that can't be controlled or hidden. A jar of store-brand tomato sauce, the kind that's on sale because the label is slightly dented, sat perched precariously on top. Lucio hummed softly to himself. An old Italian song his late wife used to sing while cooking. He'd been thinking about her lately. 20 years gone, and some days it felt like yesterday. The jar slipped. It happened in slow motion, at least that's how it would play back later in everyone's memory. The glass tumbling through cold air. Lucio's hand reaching too late. The wet explosion as it hit the asphalt, tomato sauce spraying outward in an almost artistic arc. Red, bright, dramatic. Some of it, maybe a dozen drops, no more, splattered across Jeremy's pristine white sneakers. The YouTuber's head snapped toward the sound. His cameraman pivoted instantly, capturing everything. And Jeremy's face transformed, that practiced expression of theatrical outrage spreading like a mask clicking into place. "Yo, are you serious right now?" His voice carried across the parking lot, sharp and performative, designed for maximum audio quality and post-production. Lucio looked up, his weathered face creasing immediately with concern. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, young man. My hands, they slip sometimes. Please, let me get something to clean." But Jeremy was already moving toward him, camera crew in tow, feeding off the attention from nearby shoppers who'd stopped to watch. This was content gold. Old guy. Expensive shoes. Perfect setup. "Do you know how much these cost?" Jeremy demanded, pointing at his sneakers like they were religious artifacts. $800. $100. "I'll pay for the cleaning," Lucio said quietly, his voice gentle despite the growing humiliation. His hands trembled worse now. Stress always made the Parkinson's worse. "I truly am so sorry. It was an accident." "An accident?" Jeremy laughed for the camera, playing to his invisible audience of millions. "Nah, man. Careless people like you need to learn to be more careful." Lucio stooped carefully, his knees protesting, reaching for the broken glass. "Please, let me clean this up." What happened next took 3 seconds. Jeremy wound up like a pitcher preparing for the game-winning throw. His camera crew zoomed in, sensing something big. And his $800 sneaker, the one with exactly 14 drops of tomato sauce on it, connected with Lucio's side, just below the ribs. Not hard enough to break bones, but hard enough to hurt. Hard enough to humiliate. Hard enough to send a 72-year-old man stumbling backward into his own car, breath escaping in a shocked gasp, groceries scattering across the pavement like casualties. The parking lot went silent. Someone dropped their shopping bags. A woman covered her mouth. A child stared wide-eyed from inside a cart, confused about why the world had suddenly stopped making sense. Lucio caught himself against the car door, one hand pressed to his side, his face not angry, but confused, the expression of someone trying to understand what he'd done to deserve this. His breath came in short gasps, not from pain alone, but from shock, from the violation of it. "It's okay, son," he whispered even then. Even hurt. Even humiliated. "It's okay." Jeremy turned back to his camera, grinning that practiced influencer grin. "That's content, baby. Did you see his face? That's going viral." His crew laughed. His cameraman gave a thumbs up. In Jeremy's world, this was victory. But across the parking lot, 5 engines that had been idling quietly suddenly shut off. 5 men who'd been sipping coffee and talking about nothing important stopped talking. 5 Hell's Angels stood up from their motorcycles with a kind of deliberate slowness that makes time feel heavier, that makes air feel thicker, that makes people instinctively step back even when no threat has been spoken. Rex, Super C, Carlson removed his sunglasses slowly, folding them with care and tucking them into his vest pocket. His eyes, steel gray, and carrying the weight of 5 decades lived hard but lived right, found Jeremy. Found the cameras. Found the elderly man trying not to cry. He looked at his brothers. They looked back. No words needed. Brando cracked his knuckles. Big Bite's jaw tightened. Steele and Knox simply stared, their silence somehow louder than any shout. Super C's voice cut through the parking lot like gravel grinding under heavy tires. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. "Son," he said, and the single word carried enough authority to make Jeremy's grin falter. "You just filmed the wrong episode." Jeremy turned, seeing them for the first time, 5 leather-clad giants standing between him and his escape route. And in that moment, for the first time in his viral career, Jeremy Skrull realized that some moments couldn't be edited out. Some consequences couldn't be deleted. And some lessons required more than an apology video to learn. The sound started as a distant rumble. At first, Jeremy didn't notice. He was too busy reviewing the footage on his cameraman's screen, already calculating views, engagement rates, the inevitable sponsor apology he'd have to film that would somehow get even more views than the original incident. "Dude, that fall was perfect," he said, rewinding the moment of impact. The way his face just... Jeremy? His cameraman's voice had gone thin. "We've got a situation." The rumble grew louder. Deeper. Not thunder from the sky, but thunder from the earth itself. The mechanical growl of engines designed not for efficiency, but for presence, for power, for the kind of sound that makes your ribcage vibrate and your survival instincts wake up. 1 motorcycle became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 10. They rolled into the Costco parking lot from every entrance, chrome gleaming under gray autumn sky. leather vests adorned with patches that told stories most people wouldn't want to read. Harleys, mostly. A few Indians. Each one piloted by someone who looked like they'd been carved from stone and wrapped in denim. Shoppers stopped loading groceries. Car doors paused mid-close. Phones rose instinctively because this was the kind of moment that demanded documentation. Jeremy's smirk returned. His ego, briefly shaken, reassembled itself with practiced speed. Oh man, this is perfect. Are you getting this? This is like biker gang content. This is about to go so viral. But his cameraman wasn't smiling. Jeremy, I don't think they're here for content. 10 bikes became 20. 20 became 50. The parking lot filled with the mechanical thunder of 100 Harley-Davidson engines, all idling in perfect synchronization, creating a sound that didn't just fill the air, it replaced it. The wall of leather and chrome surrounded the scene in a loose circle. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present, undeniable, inescapable. Super C walked forward, his 4 brothers flanking him. His boots struck the pavement with deliberate weight, each step measured and calm. Behind him, 95 more bikers sat motionless on their machines, watching with a kind of stillness that's more intimidating than any show of force. Jeremy's grin wavered. He looked at his crew, then back at the approaching giant, trying to calculate the angle, the play, the way to spin this in his favor. Hey man, Jeremy started, forcing that influencer brightness back into his voice. This is actually really cool timing. We're filming. Apologize to the man you kicked. Super C's voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. It carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that comes from decades of living by a code that most people only pretend to understand. Jeremy blinked. What? The old man on the ground. The one you assaulted for views. Apologize. Now. Jeremy laughed. That nervous YouTuber laugh he used when comments got too real, when sponsors asked uncomfortable questions. Come on, dude. It was just a prank. He's fine. It's what I do. It's literally my job. Super C said nothing. Just stared. Behind him, 100 engines idled. 100 men watched. And somehow, the silence beneath all that mechanical thunder was the loudest thing Jeremy had ever heard. Look, I don't know who you guys are, Jeremy tried. We're the people who were sitting right there, Brando interrupted, pointing to their bikes near the entrance, when you kicked a 72-year-old man with Parkinson's disease for internet points. The color drained from Jeremy's face. He has. I didn't know he was. You didn't care, Big Bite finished. That's the problem. Jeremy looked around desperately. Shoppers were filming now. His own cameraman had lowered his equipment, suddenly unwilling to document this particular moment. The Escalade was blocked in by motorcycles. There was no exit. No edit button. No way to delete what came next. Fine, Jeremy snapped, his voice brittle with wounded pride. Sorry, old dude. My bad. Can we go now? From behind Super C, a quiet voice emerged. Lucio had managed to stand, one hand still pressed to his side, the other gripping his car for support. Please, the old man said, his voice barely carrying over the engines. Please don't hurt him. He's just a boy. He doesn't understand. Every head turned toward Lucio. This man, kicked, humiliated, filmed at his moment of pain, was defending his attacker. Super C's expression softened slightly. He looked at Lucio with the kind of respect reserved for people who've earned it through character rather than performance. We're not going to hurt him, Professor, Super C said, and something in his tone suggested history, connection, a story that predated this parking lot. We're going to teach him. He turned back to Jeremy, and the softness evaporated. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., you show up at his house. Super C pulled a piece of paper from his vest and held it out. This is his address. You're going to help him with whatever he needs. Groceries, cleaning, errands, whatever an old man with Parkinson's needs from someone who put him on the ground. You can't make me, Jeremy started. No cameras, Super C continued, as if Jeremy hadn't spoken. No crew. No posting about it. No turning someone's dignity into your content redemption arc. Just you showing up, doing the work. And if I don't? Jeremy's voice cracked slightly on the question. Steele stepped forward, pulling out his own phone. Then we make sure every news outlet, every sponsor, Every person in your comment section sees the unedited footage. We've got 17 different angles of you kicking an elderly disabled man. We know people at CNN, MSNBC, local news stations across 3 states. Your viral moment becomes your career obituary. Jeremy's hands were shaking now. That's blackmail. That's consequences, Brando corrected. Something you've apparently never experienced. Knox spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. You spent your whole life filming other people's humiliation. Tomorrow you learn what service looks like. Super C leaned in close enough that only Jeremy could hear his next words. 1 week. 7 mornings. You show up, you do the work, you learn what strength actually means. At the end, if you've learned anything, we let this go. If you don't show up, or if you show up with cameras, he gestured to the 100 bikers surrounding them. Well, we're very good at following people. And we've got nothing but time. He straightened, turned toward Lucio, and his voice gentled again. Professor, you need help getting home. Lucio shook his head, still clutching his side. I'll manage. But please promise me. No harm will come to him, Super C assured. You have my word. We're just making sure he grows up. Should have happened 20 years ago, but better late than never. The old man nodded slowly, then looked at Jeremy with eyes that held no anger. Only sadness. Only disappointed hope. I'll see you tomorrow morning, son, Lucio said quietly. 7 o'clock. I'll put the coffee on. Super C handed Jeremy the paper with Lucio's address. The YouTuber took it with numb fingers, his usual confidence shattered like the jar of sauce still staining the pavement. Tomorrow, Super C repeated. No cameras. No excuses. Just you and the consequences of who you've decided to be. Then, as one, the 100 Hells Angels started their engines. The sound was deafening, not a threat, but a promise. A reminder that some forces can't be bought, influenced, or algorithmed away. They rolled out information, leaving Jeremy standing alone in a parking lot full of witnesses, holding a piece of paper that felt heavier than anything he'd ever lifted. His cameraman approached cautiously. So, do we film tomorrow, or... No, Jeremy whispered, staring at the address in his shaking hand. No cameras. For the first time in his career, Jeremy Skrull would have to show up as himself. And he had no idea who that was. Jeremy woke at 6:47 a.m. to the sound of his phone exploding. Not literally, though it felt that way. Notifications flooded his screen in an endless cascade, thousands of them, tens of thousands, scrolling so fast the numbers blurred. His eyes, still crusted with sleep and the residue of a night spent staring at ceilings, could barely focus. He opened Twitter first. Mistake. Hashtag Jeremy Skrull is over party was trending worldwide. Number 3, right below some celebrity divorce and above a political scandal. His mentions were a wasteland of rage, disappointment, and gleeful schadenfreude. Imagine kicking an old man with Parkinson's for views. Disgusting. This is why influencer culture is toxic. No accountability until they get caught. I hope he loses everything. He deserves it. His agent called at 6:52. Jeremy answered with a hoarse, What? 3 sponsors dropped you overnight, Marcus said without preamble. Gamer Fuel, Apex Clothing, and Nova Sound. That's 400,000 in contracts gone. 2 more are reviewing their partnerships, which is corporate speak for we're just waiting for the news cycle to move on before we quietly cut ties. Jeremy sat up, his designer sheets suddenly feeling like sandpaper. Can we do damage control? I'll post an apology, Don't you dare post anything, Marcus snapped. Every word you say right now is gasoline on a fire. The video has 12 million views. 12 million people watched you kick an elderly disabled man. No apology video is going to fix this. So what do? Silence. Then quietly, you show up at that address. You do whatever those bikers told you to do. And you pray that when this is over, you still have a career left. The line went dead. Jeremy drove to Lucio's address in silence, his Escalade feeling suddenly obscene on these modest streets. The neighborhood was old, not run down, but worn with dignity. Small houses with tidy yards. American flags on porches. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names. Lucio's house was a pale blue bungalow with white trim and a garden that had been carefully tended despite trembling hands. A ceramic garden gnome smiled cheerfully from beside the mailbox. Wind chimes hung from the porch, singing softly in the morning breeze. Jeremy sat in his car for 3 full minutes, paralyzed by something he couldn't name. Shame, maybe, or the unfamiliar weight of consequence. Finally, at 7:04, he knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Lucio stood there, broom in hand, wearing a cardigan that had been mended at the elbows and slippers that had seen better decades. His face, bruised slightly on one side from yesterday's fall, broke into a smile that Jeremy absolutely did not deserve. "You came," Lucio said, his voice warm as sunlight through old windows. "That means something." Jeremy opened his mouth, closed it. He prepared speeches in the car, defensive explanations, half-hearted apologies, the kind of performative remorse that usually got him out of trouble. But standing here, facing this man's unearned kindness, every word felt cheap. Yeah, I'm here. Come in, come in. Coffee's almost ready." Lucio stepped aside, moving carefully, one hand on the doorframe for support. The house smelled like old books and cinnamon. Every surface held a story. Framed photographs of a younger Lucio with a beautiful woman who must have been his wife, bookshelves crammed with worn paperbacks, a piano in a corner with sheet music yellowed by time. "Bathrooms down the hall if you need it," Lucio said, shuffling toward the kitchen. "We'll start with the garage. I've got boxes that need moving, books for my students at the community center. My hands aren't what they used to be, so I'm afraid it's gotten quite cluttered." Jeremy followed him into a kitchen that belonged to another era. Linoleum floors, a coffee maker older than Jeremy, a counter on the wall from a bank that had probably gone out of business. "I don't usually do manual labor," Jeremy said, the complaint automatic. "That's okay. You'll learn." Lucio poured 2 cups of coffee, one for Jeremy, though he hadn't asked. "Cream? Sugar? Black's fine." The garage was packed with cardboard boxes, each labeled in careful handwriting. ESL Level 1, Poetry, Intermediate, History Veterans Class. Jeremy lifted the first one and nearly dropped it. "Jesus, what's in here?" "Rocks. Books," Lucio said mildly. "Knowledge tends to be heavy." "You'll find that's true metaphorically, too." Jeremy carried boxes for 40 minutes, his designer hoodie soaking with sweat, his manicured hands developing blisters. He complained about the weight, about the dust, about the early morning. Lucio simply hummed that same Italian melody from yesterday, organizing the boxes as Jeremy brought them out, never once commenting on the younger man's whining. Then Lucio started coughing. Not a polite cough. A deep, racking thing that bent him double, his whole body convulsing with the effort to breathe. He grabbed for the workbench, missed, started to fall. Jeremy caught him. The movement was instinctive, unthinking. His hands, the same hands that had scrolled through hate comments an hour ago, that had held cameras while filming cruelty, now steadied an old man's trembling frame. "You okay?" Jeremy heard himself ask, and was surprised to find he meant it. Lucio nodded, gasping, one hand pressed to his chest. "Just need my inhaler." Kitchen counter. Blue. Jeremy ran. Actually ran, which was something he hadn't done for another person in years. He found the inhaler, brought it back, watched as Lucio took 2 desperate puffs, and gradually, slowly, his breathing steadied. "Thank you," Lucio whispered. They sat on the garage floor together, surrounded by boxes of books, while Lucio's breathing returned to normal. Jeremy noticed, for the first time, how thin the old man was, how the Parkinson's tremor never fully stopped, how this simple morning of moving boxes was probably exhausting for him in ways Jeremy would never understand. "Why aren't you angry at me?" Jeremy asked quietly, surprising himself with the question. Lucio was silent for a long moment, considering. Then he smiled, not the performative smile Jeremy used for thumbnails, but something real and sad and infinitely kind. "Because anger never healed anyone, son." He placed a trembling hand on Jeremy's shoulder. "And you're not beyond healing. Just lost. Lots of young people are lost these days. The cameras make it worse. You start performing yourself until you forget who you actually are." Jeremy felt something crack in his chest. Not break. Just crack open. "I don't know who I am without the cameras," he admitted, the words escaping before he could stop them. Lucio squeezed his shoulder gently. "Then maybe it's time you found out." Day 3 arrived with autumn rain tapping against windows like impatient fingers. Jeremy showed up at 6:55 a.m., 5 minutes early for the first time in his life. He'd stopped checking his phone obsessively. The hate had become white noise. What mattered now, though he couldn't quite articulate why, was showing up, doing the work, proving to someone, maybe himself, that he was capable of more than performance. Lucio answered the door in paint-splattered overalls, holding a screwdriver. Perfect timing. The bookshelf in the study is trying to commit suicide. I thought maybe we could convince it otherwise. The study was a small room drowning in books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves sagged under the weight of literature. Shakespeare beside Neruda, beside Steinbeck, beside books in languages Jeremy couldn't even identify. A wooden shelf near the window had partially collapsed, books scattered across the floor like fallen soldiers. Structural integrity, Lucio explained, handing Jeremy the screwdriver. Lost its faith somewhere around volume 7 of Proust. Can't say I blame it. They worked in comfortable silence, Jeremy following Lucio's patient instructions. Tighten here. Support there. Pass me that bracket. For someone whose hands trembled constantly, Lucio's knowledge was steady, accumulated through decades of fixing his own problems because hiring help was a luxury he couldn't afford. Around 9 a.m., the rumble of motorcycles announced visitors. Super C and Brando appeared in the doorway, leather vests dark with rain, carrying bags from the local diner. Morning, Professor, Super C said, placing the bags on the kitchen table. Brought breakfast. Figured you boys might be hungry. Jeremy froze, screwdriver halfway to a screw, suddenly aware he was being evaluated. Super C's eyes swept the room, the partially repaired shelf, the organized books, Jeremy's hands actually doing work instead of holding a phone. Making progress, Super C observed. Not a question. An assessment. He's a quick learner, Lucio said generously. Just needed someone to teach him that work can be its own reward. Brando leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. How's the influencer life treating you these days, kid? Jeremy's jaw tightened. Lost half my sponsors. Comment section wants me dead. You know, living the dream. Good, Brando said flatly. Maybe now you'll understand what consequences taste like. But Super C's expression was less harsh. You keep showing up like this, keep doing the work, and maybe you'll discover there's life after being humbled. Better life, even. The kind that doesn't require cameras to prove it exists. They ate breakfast together, eggs and toast, nothing fancy, but it tasted better than any catered influencer event Jeremy had ever attended. The bikers told stories about Lucio, painting a picture Jeremy had never imagined. Professor taught me to read, Super C said, coffee cup dwarfed in his massive hands. I was 23, dropped out of school at 15, couldn't read past the 6th grade level. He ran free classes at the VFW hall. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years. Never charged a dime. Jeremy looked at Lucio, who waved off the praise modestly. Reading is a human right, the old man said. Not a privilege. He taught my brother English, Brando added. Came here from Guatemala, couldn't speak a word. Professor spent 6 months tutoring him for free. Now he's a paralegal. Has his own family. That doesn't happen without people like Lucio. Jeremy felt something cold settle in his stomach. These people, immigrants, veterans, the struggling and overlooked, were exactly the type he'd build his brand mocking. Street interviews where he deliberately confused people whose English was imperfect. Pranks on homeless veterans. Content designed to make his audience feel superior by punching down. And this man, who had every reason to hate him, had spent decades lifting up the same people Jeremy had spent years tearing down for views. After breakfast, Lucio asked Jeremy to help him clean his car, a simple task that revealed more where than Jeremy had noticed before. The interior smelled like old books and peppermints. A rosary hung from the rearview mirror. On the dashboard, a faded air freshener shaped like a pine tree that had long since lost its scent. Can't drive much anymore, Lucio explained, watching Jeremy work from the porch. Parkinson's makes it dangerous. But I like keeping it clean. Reminds me of Sunday drives with my wife. Jeremy found the photograph tucked in the sun visor. It showed a younger Lucio, still gray, but less weathered, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a brilliant smile. They were in front of this same house probably 30 years ago, arms around each other, looking at the camera like they shared a secret the whole world was lucky to witness. On the back in faded ink, Rosa and Lucio, 1994. 40 years married. Here's to 40 more. Love always. Jeremy turned the photo over in his hands, careful not to smudge it with his cleaning rag fingers. When did she? 22 years ago this December, Lucio said quietly. Cancer. Quick and cruel. One day she was here, 6 months later she was gone. I'm sorry. Don't be. I got 47 years with the finest woman who ever lived. Some people never get a day like that. Lucio smiled, though his eyes held old sadness. She's the one who started the tutoring program. Said everyone deserves a chance to tell their story, but you can't tell your story if you can't read or speak the language. After she died, I kept it going. Felt like keeping her alive in a way. Jeremy stared at the photograph. Real love. Real loss. Real purpose built from grief and transformed into service. Everything he'd spent his life chasing, attention, validation, the appearance of maturity, suddenly felt hollow compared to this. Behind him, Big Bite's voice rumbled with amusement. Never thought I'd see an influencer using a mop. Jeremy turned to find 3 more bikers had arrived. Big Bite, Steele, and Knox, all grinning at the sight of him scrubbing a car interior with actual effort. Looking good, kid, Steele called out. Almost like a real person. The angels laughed, but there was warmth in it. Not mockery. Not the cruel laughter of his comment section. Just the gentle ribbing of people watching someone learn to be better. How's he doing, Professor? Knox asked Lucio. The old man looked at Jeremy with something that might have been pride. He's showing up. That's the hardest part. The rest is just time and willingness. Jeremy returned to cleaning, their laughter fading into easy conversation behind him. He polished the dashboard until it gleamed, cleaned windows until they were streak-free, vacuumed corners that probably hadn't been touched in years. And the whole time, he kept glancing at that photograph on the porch beside Lucio. 47 years. Free classes. Service without recognition. Love that endured past death through the good it inspired in others. That was content that mattered. That was a life that meant something. And for the first time, Jeremy understood the difference between being seen and being worth seeing. Between having followers and being worth following. Between fame that faded and character that endured. His hands were blistered. His back ached. His phone sat ignored in his pocket. And somehow for the first time in years, Jeremy Skrull felt like he might actually be doing something real. Day 5 started with rain again, but this time Jeremy barely noticed. He'd fallen into a rhythm. Wake at 6, drive through streets still dark, arrive before Lucio even put the coffee on. There was something steadying about the routine, about knowing exactly what was expected and delivering it without performance or pretense. But old habits die hard. While Lucio napped in his armchair that afternoon, exhausted from their morning trip to the library to return books for his students, Jeremy's hand drifted to his phone. He'd been avoiding it. 3 days of digital silence, the longest he'd gone since middle school. But curiosity, that old enemy, finally won. He opened Instagram first. His follower count had dropped by 2 million. 2 million people gone like smoke. His latest posts, the ones from before the incident, back when his life was parties and pranks, were flooded with comments that made his stomach turn. Hope it was worth it, kicking an old man for views. Unsubscribed. You're trash. My grandfather has Parkinson's. Watching you do that made me physically sick. Twitter was worse. Multiple hashtags trending simultaneously. Hashtag Jeremy Skrull is over party. Hashtag cancel Jeremy Skrull. Hashtag justice for Lucio. Someone had created a compilation of his cruelest pranks set to sad music, contrasting them with clips of him kicking Lucio. 43 million views. His hands started shaking, not like Lucio's tremor, which came from disease, but from something uglier. Fear. Loss. The terrifying realization that the empire he'd built was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Your coffee's getting cold. Jeremy jumped. Lucio stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane, eyes clear despite his nap. He'd seen the phone, seen Jeremy's face, understood immediately. I was checking. Jeremy's voice trailed off. What could he say? That he was watching his career die in real time? That every notification felt like a small death? Lucio shuffled to the kitchen table, gestured for Jeremy to sit. He poured 2 fresh cups of coffee with trembling hands, the liquid sloshing slightly but never spilling. Decades of practice managing the unmanageable. How bad? Lucio asked gently. Bad? 2 million followers gone. Every sponsor dropped. They're making compilations of my worst moments, showing them to the world like evidence at a trial. And how does that make you feel? Jeremy laughed bitterly. Like I'm dying. Like everything I built is turning to ash. Lucio stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against ceramic. If you live for applause, you'll die when it stops. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. But what else is there? Jeremy asked, and the question came out small, vulnerable, the voice of someone much younger than 24. The views, the followers, the comments, that's how I know I matter. Without that, I'm just nobody. Is that what you think I am? Lucio asked. Nobody. Jeremy's head snapped up. No, that's not what I have no followers. No sponsors. No one knows my name outside this neighborhood. Lucio smiled softly. But I've taught 200 people to read. I've helped 40 immigrants pass their citizenship tests. I've sat with veterans who had nightmares and needed someone to talk to at 3 in the morning. Tell me, Jeremy, does that make me nobody? Jeremy couldn't answer. His throat had closed around words that wouldn't come. The applause is nice, Lucio continued. Recognition feels good. But it's cotton candy, sweet and substantial until you actually try to hold it. Then it's just sticky air. He placed a trembling hand over Jeremy's. The work, though. The service. The way you feel when you've genuinely helped someone without expecting anything back, that's bread. That sustains you. They sat in silence while the rain drummed against windows and the afternoon light faded toward evening. I need your help tonight, Lucio said finally. Community center. Tuesday and Thursday nights, I teach English as a second language. 20 students, mostly adults. My hands. He held them up, watching them shake. Can't write on the whiteboard anymore. Can't hold books steady. But you could. Jeremy had planned to go home. To maybe film an apology video, try to salvage something from the wreckage. But looking at Lucio's hopeful face, he found himself nodding. Yeah, okay. What do I need to do? The community center was a converted church basement. Folding tables, mismatched chairs, a whiteboard that had seen better decades. Students trickled in around 7. A woman from El Salvador with 3 kids in tow. An older man from Vietnam who'd been in the country for 40 years but never learned to read English. A young couple from Syria holding hands like lifelines. They greeted Lucio with genuine warmth. Hugs. Smiles. Questions about his health. He introduced Jeremy simply as my friend who's helping tonight, and no one recognized him. To them, he was just another volunteer, just another person showing up to help. Lucio taught while Jeremy wrote. The old man would speak slowly, clearly, and Jeremy would translate his words to the whiteboard. Verb conjugations, sentence structure, pronunciation tricks. Every lesson was patient, kind, focused on building confidence rather than exposing ignorance. During a break, the woman from El Salvador approached Jeremy, speaking careful English. Thank you for help. Mr. Lucio, his hands hurt too much. We worry about him. But he never missed class. How long has he been teaching you? 3 years. Every Tuesday, Thursday. No money. Just how you say, heart. Just heart, Jeremy repeated quietly. Later, when the students had left and they were stacking chairs, Lucio shared his own story. After Rosa died, I wanted to die too. His voice was matter of fact, not seeking pity. Couldn't see the point of waking up. Stopped eating. Stopped teaching. Just sat in our house waiting for my heart to remember it was supposed to stop beating. He paused, hands resting on a chair back. Then a student showed up at my door. Maria, the woman you met tonight, actually. She'd heard I was sick. Brought me soup she couldn't afford to make. Said she needed help studying for her citizenship test, that I was the only teacher who'd been patient with her. Lucio smiled at the memory. She saved my life by giving me a reason to keep living. Not for me, but for people who needed what I could give. Jeremy stopped stacking chairs. That's when you started the free classes again. That's when I understood that grief is selfish if you let it be. But it can also be fuel. Rosa loved helping people. So I help people. And in that way, she's still here. He tapped his chest. In every lesson, every small victory, every person who learns to tell their story. They drove home in silence, Jeremy's mind spinning. Back at Lucio's house, after they'd said good night, Jeremy sat in his Escalade with his phone in his hands. He opened YouTube, scrolled through his channel. Video after video of cruelty masquerading as comedy. Homeless people tricked. Immigrants confused and mocked. Workers humiliated. All for views. All for that cotton candy applause Lucio had described. His finger hovered over the delete button. No announcement. No dramatic farewell video. No performative redemption arc for his remaining followers to judge. Just quiet action. Private shame. The resolve to stop contributing to a world that already had enough cruelty. He deleted them, one by one. Years of content. Millions of views. All of it gone. His phone felt lighter afterward. Or maybe he did. Outside, rain continued falling, washing streets clean in the darkness, while inside, one former influencer finally understood the difference between being watched and being worth watching. Between having an audience and having a purpose. Between fame that faded with algorithms and character that compounded with time. The applause had stopped. But for the first time, Jeremy wasn't dying. He was just beginning to live. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of autumn day where frost clings to grass until noon and breath hangs visible in the air like small ghosts. Jeremy was fixing the porch railing, another item on Lucio's endless list of deferred maintenance, when the familiar rumble of a Harley announced a visitor. He looked up to see Super C pulling into the driveway, 2 cups of coffee balanced carefully in one massive hand. Morning, the biker said, dismounting with practiced ease. He handed Jeremy one of the cups. Black, right? Figured you for a black coffee guy by now. Yeah, thanks. Jeremy took the cup, its warmth seeping into his cold, stiffened fingers. Professor's inside. I'm here for you, actually. Super C leaned against the porch railing Jeremy had been working on, testing its sturdiness with his considerable weight. Wanted to see how you're holding up? Jeremy shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. Fine. Getting the work done. Showing up every day like you said. That's not what I asked. The directness of it caught Jeremy off guard. He set down his hammer, sat on the porch steps, and found himself answering honestly. I deleted all my videos. The pranks, the stunts, everything. 3 years of content, just, gone. My agents stopped calling. My parents think I'm having a breakdown. And the weird thing is, he paused, searching for words. I don't miss it. The views, the comments, the constant performing. I thought I'd feel empty without it, but I just feel lighter. Super C nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. Want to know why I really brought you here? Why we didn't just beat the hell out of you in that parking lot and call it justice? Because Lucio asked you not to? That's part of it. But there's more. Super C was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant, looking at something only he could see. 30 years ago, I was 23 years old and couldn't read past the 6th grade level. Dropped out of school at 15 to work construction. Thought I was tough, thought I had it all figured out. But inside, I was terrified. Couldn't fill out job applications. Couldn't read my own kid's report card. Couldn't even order food at a restaurant without pretending I knew what the menu said. Jeremy looked up, surprised. This bear of a man, this leader who commanded respect with his presence alone, had been illiterate? I was angry about it, Super C continued. Angry at the world, angry at myself, taking it out on everyone around me. My wife left. Said she couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. That's when I hit bottom. Sitting in an empty apartment, holding eviction notices I couldn't read, wondering if it was even worth trying anymore. He took a long sip of coffee, steam rising in the cold morning air. Then my brother, Big Bite, you've met him, dragged me to the VFW hall. Said there was a free class, no judgment, just people trying to learn. I almost walked out the first night. 23 years old, sitting in a room full of elderly immigrants and veterans, learning to sound out words like a kindergartner. My pride was screaming at me to leave. But you didn't, Jeremy said quietly. But I didn't. Because the teacher, this skinny literature professor with glasses held together by tape and shoes that had been resoled 3 times, he looked at me like I mattered. Like I wasn't broken, just unfinished. He stayed late every single night to work with me one-on-one. Never made me feel stupid. Never made me feel less than. Super C turned to face Jeremy directly. That professor was Lucio. He taught me to read. Taught me that learning isn't weakness, it's courage. Taught me that asking for help is the strongest thing a man can do. His voice grew thick with emotion. He saved my life, Jeremy. Long before I put on this jacket, before I became Super C, before any of this, he saved my life by showing me I was worth saving. Jeremy felt something crack wide open in his chest. So when you saw me kick him, I saw someone attacking the best man I've ever known. The man who taught me what real strength looks like. Super C's jaw tightened. First instinct. Yeah, I wanted to break you in half. But then I thought about what the professor would want. Not revenge. Education. The same second chance he gave me. They sat in silence while these revelations settled like snow over everything Jeremy thought he understood. I spent my entire adult life chasing numbers, Jeremy said, his voice breaking. Followers. Views. Likes. Just numbers. Meaningless validation from strangers who don't know me and don't actually care. And he gestured toward the house where Lucio was probably reading or preparing lessons or doing any of the 1,000 quiet good things he did without recognition. He spent his life building people, actually changing lives. And I kicked him. For content. For numbers that don't even matter. The tears came then. Real ones. Not the performative crying he'd done for apology videos, but the ugly, gasping kind that comes from a place too deep for cameras. Jeremy put his face in his hands, shoulders shaking, years of emptiness finally finding voice in broken sobs. Super C let him cry. Didn't try to stop it or make it comfortable. Just sat there, solid and present, one heavy hand resting on Jeremy's shoulder like an anchor in a storm. When Jeremy could finally breathe again, when the tears had slowed to something manageable, Super C spoke quietly. You want to know how to pay him back. You want to make this right? Jeremy nodded, unable to speak. Then build, son. Super C squeezed his shoulder. Build people the way he built me. Build yourself into someone worth being. Take this shame, this regret, this guilt, all of it, and turn it into fuel. Not for more views or followers or validation. For becoming the kind of man who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. I don't know how. You're already doing it. Showing up every morning. Doing the work without cameras. Learning to see people instead of content. Super C stood, finishing his coffee. The professor didn't save me in one lesson. Took 2 years of showing up, of failing, of trying again. Transformation isn't a video you post. It's a life you live. Jeremy wiped his face with his sleeve, embarrassed by the tears but unable to regret them. He never mentioned you, Jeremy said. All these days we've worked together, all the stories he's told, he never once said he taught you to read. Super C smiled. That's because to him, it wasn't special. It's just what he does. Helps people and moves on to the next person who needs help. No recognition required. No credit demanded. He started toward his motorcycle. That's what real strength looks like, kid. Not the kind you perform for cameras. He mounted his Harley, then paused. One more thing. Next Tuesday, we're doing a charity ride for Parkinson's research. Professor won't ride, can't with his condition, but he'll be there at the finish. You should come. Not to film it. Not to rebuild your image. Just to see what community looks like when it's built on service instead of clout. I'll be there, Jeremy said. Super C nodded once, started his engine, and rolled out of the driveway, leaving Jeremy alone on the porch with a cold cup of coffee and a chest that felt both broken and whole at the same time. Inside the house, Lucio had watched the whole exchange through the window. He smiled softly, said a prayer for both men, the one who had been saved 30 years ago and the one being saved right now, and returned to his books. Some lessons take minutes to teach. Others take a lifetime to learn. And the best teachers never need credit for either. Saturday morning, Jeremy woke with a clarity that felt almost physical, like waking up from a long fever to find the world sharp-edged and real again. He'd spent the last 6 days avoiding his camera equipment. It sat in the corner of his apartment gathering dust, expensive machinery that suddenly felt like archaeology from a life he no longer recognized. But today was different. Today he knew exactly what he needed to do. Not for views. Not for redemption. Not even for his career. For the truth. He called Lucio first. Professor, I need to ask you something. And it's okay to say no. I'm listening. I want to make a video. About this week. About what you've taught me. But only if you're comfortable with it. Only if. Jeremy, Lucio interrupted gently. If you think it might help someone else learn what you've learned, then you have my blessing. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Tell the truth. Not the version that makes you look good or me look saintly. Just what actually happened. The messy, uncomfortable truth. I promise. Jeremy set up his camera in his apartment. Not the elaborate lighting rigs and green screens he used to use. Just natural light from the window and a simple backdrop. He sat in front of the lens for 10 minutes, staring at his own reflection in the black screen, trying to find words that felt honest instead of rehearsed. Finally, he hit record. It's Jeremy. His voice was quieter than in his old videos. No manufactured enthusiasm. No performance. I know most of you have seen the video. The one where I kicked an elderly man in a parking lot. Some of you defended me. Most of you rightfully call me out. A lot of you unsubscribed. I don't blame you. He took a breath, steadying himself. I could make excuses. Say I was caught up in the moment, that I didn't know he had Parkinson's disease, that I've learned my lesson. But here's the truth. I didn't know he was elderly. I did see him struggling, and I kicked him anyway because in that moment, I cared more about views than I did about his humanity. That's not an excuse. That's just what happened. Jeremy's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his knees. After that video went viral, some people found me. Not fans. Not sponsors. 5 members of the Hells Angels who'd witnessed the whole thing. They gave me a choice, spend a week helping the man I'd hurt, or face consequences I really didn't want to think about. He smiled slightly. So I showed up. Reluctantly at first, if I'm being honest. I expected punishment. Maybe humiliation. Some kind of karmic payback. But that's not what I got. The video cut to footage Jeremy had filmed, with permission, over the past week. Shaky phone clips of him and Lucio working together. Repairing the bookshelf. Cleaning the car. Teaching at the community center. The clips were imperfect, unedited, raw, real. Jeremy's voiceover continued. His name is Lucio Bennett. He's 72 years old. Retired literature professor. Parkinson's disease makes his hands shake, but he still teaches free English classes twice a week for immigrants and veterans. He's been doing it for 30 years. Never charged a dime. Never asked for recognition. Just shows up. Does the work. Helps people. More footage. Lucio laughing at something Jeremy said. The tremor in his hands as he tried to hold a coffee cup. The photograph of him and Rosa. The students at the community center thanking him. And here's what I learned. Jeremy was back on camera, and his eyes were wet now, though he didn't try to hide it. I thought success was followers. Millions of people watching, liking, subscribing. I thought that's what made me matter. But this man has 20 students. 20. And he's changed more lives than I ever will with 10 million subscribers. He wiped his eyes unself-consciously. Success isn't how many people watch you. It's who follows you when you fall. And when I fell, when my career imploded, when sponsors dropped me, when the world decided I was canceled, this man I'd assaulted still opened his door. Still taught me. Still treated me like I was worth saving. Cut to footage of Jeremy helping Lucio walk to his car, the old man's hand on Jeremy's arm for support. Then to them sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, just talking. Simple moments. Honest moments. I've deleted all my prank videos. Every single one. Not because I'm trying to hide from what I did, but because I don't want to contribute to that kind of content anymore. I spent 3 years building a channel on humiliation, mockery, and cruelty disguised as comedy. I'm done with that. Jeremy leaned closer to the camera. Instead, I'm starting something new. The Lucio Bennett Scholarship Fund for educators with Parkinson's disease who want to keep teaching but can't afford the support they need. Adaptive technology, teaching assistants, medical expenses, whatever helps them continue the work they love. I'm funding it personally, not for tax write-offs or good PR. Because it's the right thing to do. He sat back. Professor Lucio showed me that real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about lifting them up. Real content isn't about views. It's about value. Real success isn't measured in followers, but in the lives you touch when nobody's filming. Final shot. Lucio on his porch, waving at the camera, his smile warm and genuine. Jeremy's voice softer now. To everyone I've hurt with my content over the years, I'm sorry. Truly. I can't undo the damage, but I can stop adding to it. And to the man I kicked in that parking lot, thank you for teaching me what it means to be human. The video ended with a title card. The man I tried to humiliate taught me to be human. Lucio Bennett's Scholarship Fund, link. Jeremy uploaded it at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Then he closed his laptop and went to Lucio's house because they had lessons to prepare for Tuesday's class. By 6 p.m., the video had 10,000 views. By 9 p.m., 500,000.